Hello and welcome to Inner Seasons, the Masterclass. I am so excited to be taking you through this topic today. We're going to be talking about cycle syncing, the 4 seasons related to the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, the difference between the men's cycle and the women's cycle, and also just some more information around your menstrual cycle so that you're not like feeling completely lost with it. And you're going to have the perfect foundations to start living in alignment with your cycle and having that awareness, which is a must, I believe, for deep self connection, being productive, and all of the things. So, we're actually going to start by just closing down our eyes, place one hand on your heart space and one hand on your womb space, your lower tummy. And I just want you to close your eyes down and breathe in through your nose for as deep as you can and as long as you can. And then just allowing it to fall out through the mouth, pushing all of the air, all of the tension, all of the thoughts, all of the things that are in the way of you having complete focus on this masterclass out of your body. And just repeating this breath a couple of times to really allow your shoulders to soften, your jaw to unclench, your mind to slow down, and to feel complete presence in your body and in this moment. And when you're ready, I invite you to come back to this space. If you don't already have a pen and paper or your Notion up or something to take notes, I do highly recommend that. I feel like it's a great opportunity for you to take notes of things that really stand out for you, and you can then strengthen your knowledge around the cycle. So I'm going to start off with addressing what is cycle syncing. It may be a term that you've heard of before, or maybe this is all completely new to you, which is also so perfect. But cycle syncing is basically the act of syncing your life up with your cycle, right? So exactly what it says, but in a way that you understand your menstrual cycle, you understand the hormonal fluctuations, and you understand that as a woman, yes, we live in a masculine society, a very go, 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 always doing things society, but we actually do operate on a different clock. And when you begin to sync your life up with your internal clock and connect to your internal rhythm, it can actually completely optimize your productivity and allow you to get even more done. So, syncing your life with your cycle looks like syncing your food, syncing your workouts, syncing your social events, syncing your self care, all of the things to actually honor you in which phase or season that you're actually in your cycle. Now, it can be really easy to kind of get lost in this and think that it's super overwhelming and there's just so much to it. And I want you to just strip that back and just remember that this actually gets to be really simple. And you just being a part of this masterclass right now, understanding your hormones, potentially beginning to track your cycle after this, which I highly recommend, and just getting into the groove is actually the first step, and it's all you need to do right now. The actual lifestyle of cycle syncing, I find, comes slowly and it comes perfectly in divine timing when you have the understanding and you begin to actually just be more in tune with your body and realize what tasks do feel better in different phases and what exercises might feel better. So just remembering that as well. Cycle syncing is syncing your life up to your cycle, but we're not going to use it as a limitation, and we're also not going to use it as a point of overwhelm to spiral and not actually do anything about it at all. Just remembering that it's all education. I also want to touch on how we are not carbon copies of each other. You would know, looking at each girl in your friend group, every single woman is so incredibly different in looks, in personality, in energy, in all the things. So never expect your cycle to be like anyone else's. It is your cycle. No one else owns it. It's actually your body. So of course it's going to be different. You're going to probably hear, if you're like just delving into this work or you've been a part of understanding this stuff, that sometimes you hear that things should be a certain way, but I just want you to remove the should. Nothing should be anything. There are norms and there are also commonalities in like the menstrual cycle space, and there's averages, but at the end of the day, you're going to know your body best and you're going to know what is right for your body, and certain things might just be a little bit different for you, and that's actually perfect, because just like we all like to make our cup of coffee different every morning, your cycle is just going to be different. So just really remembering that there's actually power in accepting the difference in your cycle compared to anyone else. So you've probably heard that like this, your menstrual cycle should optimally be 28 days. That's thrown around all the time, right? The 28-day cycle and how that's the perfect cycle. And it's like glamorized, like it's all just glamorized, like it should be 28 days. That's well and good. That's perfect. But maybe your perfect cycle isn't 28 days. Maybe your perfect cycle is 26 days, or maybe yours is 35 days. These are all perfect cycles. As long as you're not suffering with pain throughout your cycle, as long as you have a regular flow and it's not too heavy or it's not too light, as long as you have an ovulation cycle, all these things, which I'm not going to go super into depth with. But as long as your cycle is doing its thing and cycling, you have a perfect cycle as long as you feel happy in it, right? So, yes, the average cycle length is 28 days, but we're not to glamorize that in this space anymore. The normal cycle length for a woman is actually 21 to 35 days. So that's a huge difference, right? Like if we're all aiming for that 28, but your normal for your body is actually 21 or 35, well, there's going to be a disconnect there. You're going to think there's something wrong with you. And I just want you to remember that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Your cycle is perfect for your body. In teenagers and younger women as well, the average cycle can actually be up to 45 days, and that is still deemed as like a great cycle length. So just remembering that. So many different things can come into play when it comes to the length of your cycle. We can look at stress. So it could be conscious stress, it could be toxic load stress. So, like what products that you're using on your skin and hair and like all the things in your home cleaning, right? It can be nutrition and diet. So, how you're feeding yourself. It can be how much exercise you're doing. Other things like medical reasons, like maybe you are on medication or you have certain medical conditions. These all play a huge role in your average cycle length for your own cycle. So just remembering this, we are not carbon copies of each other, and that is perfect. The next point I want to touch on before we get into the phases and before we tie that into the seasons is the infradian versus circadian rhythm. So we all would know that the clock that we kind of go by is the 9 to 5. Wake up in the morning, get ready for your day, go into your job, and you just kind of do that repeat 9 to 5 lifestyle, right? And that is how society has been built. It has been built on the male clock. Now, I want you to look at it from a lens of the moon and the sun. So the sun is a 24 the sun is a 24-hour cycle, right? It rises and falls within 24 hours. So when it's bright, we have the energy, we're out doing the things. And when it's dark and it's not available, we're not available. We're in bed, we're sleeping, we're doing all the things, right? We're not doing all the things really. This is the same clock that men's hormones run off. So they have this rise in the middle of the day, and then it slowly drops, and then they have the quiet sleep time at night. Women, yes, although we function on the circadian rhythm, we do have our own inbuilt circadian rhythm. It's not to take away from that, but we actually have an extra clock, which is really, really cool, especially when you know how to work with it and when you understand it. And it is the infradian rhythm. So this is a 28.5-day cycle that's like the moon cycle anyway, when we relate it to the moon. But again, I want you to remember that your infradian rhythm is going to be accustomed and unique to your body. But we're going to just be applying this infradian rhythm to the moon cycle just for that visual and so that you can kind of really lock that into your mind. The moon cycle is on average 28.5 days. If the moon goes through all these phases, she starts in her darkness as the new moon, and she slowly waxes and waxes and waxes, goes through her waxing gibbous until she gets to the fullness where it's nice and bright, and then it wanes and wanes and wanes and wanes, and a new cycle begins, right? That's a 28.5-day cycle. And that is on average what we are cycling through. So that's why the moon can be a really great like key point for you. But I just want you to take note of like, that's a very big difference, 24 hours versus 28.5 days. But that's why the moon is like much more of like that feminine force. I'm not going to get super into that, but I just want you to remember this part is, yes, we have a circadian rhythm, although as women, when we connect in with our natural rhythm, which is our menstrual cycle and our hormones and how different they are, how they rise and rise and rise and rise, they peak and then they drop and drop and drop and drop over the span of a month. It makes a lot of things make sense, and it allows you to take away from the shame of why you're probably not productive in a certain time of your cycle and why you're probably extra creative at a different time. And it's a really great way for you to just have that visual so that you're like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. Why am I not already aware of this? Okay, I'm going to now go into the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle and just a little bit about the hormones that are at play at different phases of our cycle, just so that you can get a bit of an understanding of what's going on in your body and why there are actually really significant changes. And your body is doing a lot behind the scenes that you're not even consciously having to put effort into, although it does consume more energy at different phases. And that is why you can feel tired. It's not because there's anything wrong with you. So we're going to get into that. So, the first phase of our menstrual cycle is menstruation, which is also known as our period, our bleed time, whatever you refer to it as. And this is on average 1 to 7 days, right? So for some women, it can be like a little bit longer. For some women, it can be a little bit less. You're going to know what your cycle is for your body, of course. But menstruation is the time when all of our hormones are actually at their lowest. So they've all completely dropped. And it is the drop in progesterone and estrogen that has actually like activated our bleed to come through. And then we move into our follicular phase. So this can also be taught that our follicular phase does start at the start of menstruation, but just for ease of understanding, we're just going to separate them into the 4 different phases. So follicular phase begins on, say, on average day 6 or 7, just after menstruation. And this peaks through all the way up until your day of your fertile window, which is ovulation, around day 13 to 14. And this is activated let me rephrase that. So throughout your follicular stage, your FSH levels are beginning to rise and your estrogens are also beginning to rise. So this is the phase where when we relate it to the moon, it's like rising and rising and rising, right? So all of your hormones are beginning to peak, 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 almost like they're climbing up a mountain. So menstruation, hormones are at their lowest. Follicular phase, they're beginning to rise. Ovulation, we've had our peak in estrogen, we've had our peak in LH, which is luteinizing hormone, and our body is beginning to prepare for implantation because it's in its fertile window. So ovulation time is the only time that we're fertile, and this is the phase that comes straight after the follicular phase, and it's only actually a 48-hour phase of our cycle. But something I want you to really keep in mind is although we only have our fertile window for this 48-hour window, it is still important to be careful if you are not wanting to conceive in 5 days prior to ovulation and a couple of days after, so like about 2 days after, just so that you are being aware to use your form of conscious contraception in that time or however that looks for you if you are not wanting to conceive. If you're wanting to conceive, this is your time. Jump right in there. The time is now days 13, 14. And, there's different ways to track this and know what phase you're in. I'm not going to get into that here, but just remembering that. Okay, fertile window complete. We're now moving into the final stage of our menstrual cycle, the 4th phase of our cycle, and that is the luteal phase. Now, in our luteal phase, this is the time when our progesterone is the only hormone that has actually peaked. So it's beginning to slowly peak right up until the end. And progesterone is that hormone that really like starts bringing us inward, and we're kind of like, I don't want to be around people, because it's like really preparing your body to just like be in a state of inwardness, because it's actually your body thinks up until your next bleed that you're actually preparing for pregnancy. So all of the other hormones have actually dropped off after ovulation. That's why in ovulation, you may also feel that you have more energy and all the things. Then luteal phase, that first week of the luteal phase, you're usually still pretty good because the hormones are just slowly dropping. But the final week of the luteal phase, your progesterone's at its peak and all the other hormones have dropped off, and you're kind of probably going to be a bit more in your own energy, in your own world, not wanting to be around as many people. And of course, the luteal phase can get a really bad rap. And I promise it doesn't have to be like the whole PMSing, like all that. That is absolutely not how your menstrual cycle has to feel and your luteal phase. And that is why cycle syncing is just so important and having an understanding about it, right? So I've gone through the 4 phases. Now you're probably wondering, what about the seasons? And I'm going to tie that in for you right now. So we started off with our menstruation phase. As I mentioned, hormones are at their lowest. Now, when all the hormones are at their lowest, so is your body temperature. And that is indicating an inner winter. So, in a winter, being that you have a cooler body temperature, it's important to keep yourself warm. It's important to be eating nourishing, warm meals and taking it a little slower than you would in other phases of your cycle. And that's why these seasons can be a really great indication and really great way for you to learn the four phases of your cycle really fast to begin your cycle syncing journey really easily, right? And then we move into the follicular phase. And as I mentioned, it's like all the hormones, they're climbing up the mountain, they're rising. When they're rising, so is our energy level, so is our body temperature. So we're coming to a place where we're coming out of like our little cocoon and we're like, I'm ready to be seen. I want to be out in the world. And that's why the follicular phase is closely linked to the springtime. Because think of the spring, everything's blossoming, everything's blooming, everything's feeling pretty good, right? It's like, oh, the temperature's starting to warm up a little bit. Potentially I could go to the beach. And that's kind of like the energy of the follicular phase, right? We're like coming out of that shell, we're coming out of our womb cave, and it's time to blossom and bloom. This is a time as well when you want to start eating like fresh and light meals. You might in your work want to be like starting new projects because everything's just blossoming and feeling really, really good. And it's a time when you're really curious. So like maybe you want to go start a dance class or you want to go try at a different gym or like whatever it is. And working out in this phase can very much look like Pilates. You can start incorporating HIIT classes again. Like it's really just like that energy of like, let's get this done. Let's go and do this. Then we have our fertile window, which is ovulation. Everything's at its peak. What does this feel like? This means our temperature is going to be at its peak. So our body temperature, all the hormones are at its peak. Our energy levels are, everything is at an all-time high. And what do we know about summertime? Especially here in Australia, it's hot. We're at the beach, we're socializing, we're going out with the girls, we're doing all the things. And this is really what this phase is. So it's a time to be seen. It's a time to apply yourself and go out there, communicate, have those conversations with people, really allow yourself to just be like in that energy, that fullness energy, right? This is also a time when you are going to be communicating a lot better. And it's a time when you're going to be able to articulate yourself a lot better. So if you, for example, have like a podcast or a YouTube channel where you do like recordings for videos, or maybe you do webinars or you speak in front of crowds or like whatever your job might be, planning them around this ovulation time, you're going to actually like just have naturally like a better flow and way to communicate and get your words together and not stumble on your words. So that's something also really cool to remember. And this is the time when like HIIT classes, climbing those mountains, running, hitting personal bests in the gym, all these things are going to be like the time. Like this is the time where if you want to hit a PB, like you're absolutely going to do it. Your hormones are going to so help you with that. It's also a time with food that we want to be eating like more cooler foods. So foods that cool down our system and implementing those. We then move into our luteal phase. So as I described, the first week of this cycle can actually be like still pretty high energy. It's the second week more where it's like you're coming inward, you're retreating, you're reflecting, right? It's a time of reflection. And this is related to autumn time because autumn is when the leaves are falling from the trees, the air is starting to cool down again. It's sort of like that. I'm going to take my coat with me. It might be a little bit windy outside. That's kind of just like the energy of the luteal phase, right? It's like that, I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm just going to intuitively see how I'm feeling today and just allowing that to be okay. It is a time to close loop. So it's a really great time to like audit your life, audit your environment, audit everything that's going on around you and make some tweaks and changes so that you're not taking them into the next cycle with you. The luteal phase is also going to be a time when, yeah, that first week you may be doing like some HIIT classes and things like that, but we're kind of wanting to wean that off, especially in that second week of the luteal phase and really bring it back in, dull it back down. You can still do weights, you can still do strength workouts, but also just not having the pressure on yourself that you're going to hit a personal best when all your hormones are dropping, right? So it's like Pilates can be really good, yoga can be really good. Going for a nice jog can be really good. You can still climb a mountain, but it's just not being harsh on yourself if you like don't have as much energy in these phases. So that's the four seasons. We have menstruation in a winter, we have follicular phase in a spring, we have our fertile window ovulation, which is in a summer, then we have our luteal phase, which is in a autumn. Okay, so we know all the seasons. That's great. But now I want you to take away from this ways that you can care for yourself in each phase that are actually really going to support you. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to upload on this screen some journal prompts for each phase of your cycle. I highly recommend just pausing the video and then writing down these journal prompts somewhere, coming back to them each and every phase of your cycle so that you can just build that connection with each phase. Now, moving into more of a holistic approach to support your cycle syncing journey, I want you to just take a couple of things from the list that I give you that you begin to implement like right now. So the first one is, and this can be done in every phase of your cycle, particularly your luteal phase, it's going to be really great because we're really wanting to ground in our energy and ground in all of the things that are going on in our body. And this is standing outside on the grass, barefoot, soaking in those negative ions, lowering our inflammation, which is super important because our womb actually goes from like a size like this to like a size like this the 5 days prior to our bleed time and on our bleed time. So there's more inflammation there, right? So getting out on the earth and connecting it to the earth's energy, soaking in those negative ions is really going to support you and your health and grounding at this time of your cycle. Another holistic approach to cycle syncing is swapping out your water. So if you currently are drinking water straight from your tap, it's probably contributing to inflammation. It's probably contributing to acne, to pain, to all of these different little things and niggles that are coming through and just aren't feeling that good in your body. So we want to swap to a filtered water. I do have a recommended brand. I will leave it linked here and I'll also link it below. And that is the Waters Co brand. They are great. It's 99.9% filtered water. So all of the nasties get left behind, which is exactly what we want to be leaving behind. Self-connection is another one. So how does self-connection look for you? Maybe it is going for a nice walk outside. Maybe it's a beautiful sensual self-massage. Maybe it's having a bath, turning the lights down and just playing your favorite songs. Potentially it's doing a yoni steam. Finding ways that you love to build self-connection with yourself and practicing those any phase of your cycle. When we pay attention to us, when we connect with us, we're going to understand what's going on in our body a lot quicker before our body gets to a point of actually having to scream at us. We're going to know when there's like something going on, right? And that's why self-connection is just so important every single day. Not to shame yourself if you don't get to it every single day, but just making yourself a priority and valuing yourself is actually going to have a huge impact on your journey in having a pain-free period, connecting to your cycle and cycle syncing, because you're slowly just going to start syncing these little things into each phase that feels really good for you, and you're automatically cycle syncing without it having to be a huge overwhelming thing. Once you have been practicing your journal prompts and you've built your self-connection and you take on board all of the things that I've shared with you today, you're going to feel so empowered by your cycle because you have the complete foundations of what is your menstrual cycle, what are the inner seasons, and allowing the inner seasons to just navigate, be that form of navigation for you of like, should I be doing this? Would I do it in the winter time? And, allowing it to just be that intuitive flow for you. I hope you have enjoyed this masterclass and I'm really looking forward to hearing how it landed for you. And if you have any questions, just jump in my DMs on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. Before we wrap it up, I just want to remind you, we are not carbon copies of each other. Each and every one of us is different, and that's what makes us so, so special. We are not on that 24-hour clock. So if you've felt your whole life like it's just a drag at some phases of your cycle, I really hope this has supported you to build that connection with yourself and to start living your life in alignment with your incredible body's natural rhythm. Bye.